Welcome back, Crown Point. Another drawing video with Mr. Sherlock here. Today we're going to be talking about typography. So I'm going to put some examples up on your screen in this video for you guys, just to get an idea what typography is. Typography is, it's kind of like the way we make letters. So you've probably noticed as you look at signs that you see around town, maybe advertisements, billboards, the bus stops, or another good way to think about it is the way words look in logos. Logos for businesses. And so what they're doing is they hire people to make those letters look that way. Sometimes you can just buy fonts like you see on your computer that you can switch fonts when you're typing a report. And sometimes we pick those for different reasons, but there's a whole study of why we make letters the way we make them and how to make them legible, but also how to give them style. And so the style and the spacing and the sizing and all the differences you can find in letters and words, and this happens in all sorts of languages, is that this is all typography, and it's the way type looks, if that makes sense. So what we're looking at is how can we today replicate some of these styles we see. So some of those examples you'll see that the artists have picked a letter in the alphabet, and they look for different ways that they can arrange the lines to make that same letter. And so that's what I want to do with you guys today. I want you guys to see that we can come up with maybe a style for the lettering. And so what I'm going to pick today is I'm just going to pick a letter in the alphabet, and since my last name is Sherlock, I really like the letter S. And so to start here, I am going to give myself in the middle of my page the nicest example I can of that letter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can't come up with variations of this letter. Now you might be picking a different letter, and that is totally fine. You do not have to do the letter S with me. I just picked it because I like my last name, and I like the letter S. I like the curves in it. Now, since I just said that, I want to think of how can I make a variation of this letter and make it different. So I just said curves, but do I have to have a letter S? Does it have to have all curves in it? Does it have to look that way? Not really. So over here, I'm going to just start with my first example. And maybe I'm going to make this about as boxy as I can. And so the letter S, and you have to think about what indicates, what makes this look this way. Before I get too into this, I'm just going to make some notes so you can see how I'm thinking. Is the letter S, it dips down right here on the end, levels out, up top here. It has to come down, and then it has to run back to the right. It has to run down again, over to the bottom, and it has to come up. So these two elements are very similar. That's what really, in a way, you have to think about this for any different letter. That's what makes the S, is that it has those dips as I see it. And then it follows this to the left, down to the right, down to the left. So back to the one I'm starting on, I did my little dip. And now I'm going to come over. So now I've gone left and down. Now I'm going to go right. And I also think this, when you see a lot of other letter S's, is if it's going to have thickness to it, it's going to be thicker at the bottom and thinner at the top. You see how that works? And that kind of also one that gives us the idea that it has weight. And I know that's really silly to think about weight, but weight is something we would talk about when we do art, is because we want things to feel grounded. This S would look a lot different if it was heavy up top, and I'm going to replicate that here. I'm going to make it real heavy up top, and you can see this feels much more awkward. It almost feels like it's going to fall over, right? We like things to feel grounded and heavy at the bottom. That's also why you see in other letters, they call them serifs. And so a sans serif font, like if I'm going to do a lowercase I, right, that's just lines and a dot, or a line and a dot. And I'm going to fill it in for you. So this would be sans serif. When you add a serif to a font, you are adding little feet. And think of that. Why would a letter need feet? Where is he going to walk to? The grocery store? No, that makes it feel grounded, right? That it's heavier down there, and you can also see this, and it might just be a little bit at the top that they poke out. And that would be kind of a fancier letter, right? So sans serif fonts are more casual. That means sans serif is without feet. And a serifed font, so we're going to say sans, and this is a serifed font where it has feet. So back to my original S, I keep distracting myself. What I was getting at is that there is a variation in the line thickness. So you see I'm going to allow for more thickness up here. And you see I followed those kind of guidelines for myself. That it's got to have this swoopy and this swoopy, top and bottom. So there is one example of a letter S. Now, can I dress this up a little bit? Of course I can. It is a drawing. And drawings are malleable. You can change them and arrange them. Do you see I'm going to add some depth to that letter? So that it feels like it has some form to it. It's not just flat. Now, if I wanted to get fancy here, I could start adding maybe some lines in it. And this is when, if you look back in history, there's all sorts of cool fonts people have come up with over the years. And fonts, they build brand identities. So if you have a business, people don't want their fonts to look like other people's fonts. They want them to be unique. They want their brand to stand out, right? They want to be individuals, right? Just like all of us want to be individuals. Look at that. So just adding some lines on the inside that really dressed up our letter S. Now I'm going to try to do maybe a more serifed type font. So I'm just going to start with a big letter S at the bottom. And now I'm going to start dressing it up. And so maybe I want to have some of those lines. So I'm going to give it a wavy line on the ends, right? That's already looking a little more fancy. And then I start thinking again about how my thickness, right, and my serifs. So these would kind of be the feet for the letter S here. And maybe I'm going to be able to do this in one fell swoop, that I'm going to be able to almost outline that existing line. And you see I kind of wiggled my pen there when I did that, but that's okay. And you see I went from the outside there, and I didn't make it quite out. Look, I touched, and now I'm going to bring that back. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to start at that end. I'm going to make it this. Do you see how that's a really nice, thick kind of shape? And you see what I did there as I went high. So this almost has this like kind of serpent look to it, which is fun. And that's another thing. People do that all the time. They start making fonts, and then those fonts, they can turn into like shapes or objects that we're all comfortable and familiar with. And so now I'm going to start adding some shapes on the insides. I got these like banana shapes. Look at that. Really dressing up my letter S. Maybe letter S here is getting ready to go to the prom. Look at that. Got a fancy letter S. Just adding some shapes on the inside. Let's see what else I can come up with. And this is just a fun activity. This is something you could do with any letters or numbers. So I'm going to start with a normal letter S again. Maybe I'm going to have this one be really bold. So I could maybe instead of, look at this, or I could get fancy. I'm feeling this one, I don't know. Maybe I'm changing my course right here. Course of action. Do you see I brought one inside and this one inside? Now look at, what could I do? I could maybe come up with, look at that, it's like a letter J right there I put in there. So maybe this has got this thin line there. Maybe I do the same thing up there. See, it's still more bold at the bottom. It's thicker, smaller at the top. I still have those dips, and then dip up, dip down. And that's highly stylized is what I'd call that. And look, I can even do variations off of that. Maybe I'll do one right next to it, because maybe these guys are going to be friends. Maybe this time I'm going to even go more extreme. And there is a point you're going to hit, you could hit, with you make your letter just too weird and it doesn't look like that letter anymore. And it's trying to find that balance. Like, is it a little change or is it a big change? Right? Are we going too far? And look at this. Maybe I see these domes. Look at that. This is still an S, isn't it? I don't know if I've ever seen a letter S that looks like that. But you know what? That is why I am a designer. Because designers get to make the decisions, and everyone else just gets to play with the outcomes. So look, I'm going to do two lines. I'm going to go one from the center, and so I'll do that up top, one from the center, and then I'm going to do one from the end. One from the end. And it's almost like those guys touch. You see that? Come across and touch. So that's a little bit weirder variation of that, but save all your stuff. If you like what you've done, you can always redraw it, right, and come back. Maybe I'm going to come and try to do my sans serif right now. You know, I'm more comfortable right now with my small pen. And so maybe this time, you know, I'm going to pull up my pencil because I like to have lines I can erase sometimes. And so look at here. I'm going to kind of picture this is more the composition I'm thinking of now. Look, I give myself my little box. Look at, I'm going to draw a diagonal line through that box. And I'm going to draw a diagonal line through that box. There we go. So I kind of have a place for my stuff to exist. But what if in here I want to touch here and start here? So I can have my first line come down, and then I do my arc over the top. And then maybe I want to end up down here, and I want to touch there and there. So you see I'm projecting what I'm doing. And this is definitely how a designer starts thinking. It is proportions and how things relate to each other. So maybe I'm going to have this come up. So I'm working on the top of the letter now, and it's going to come down. You see I'm looking for a way to join these two lines together. And a way for those two lines to join together. And so I'm going to pull out my big Sharpie. And now I'm going to start. Now you see what I've done, how I got that. Now I'm going to outline the whole thing with my big Sharpie. But then I can start pushing lines out if I want to move them. This is why you would fill the whole thing in, is you have a lot of control and you can grow the letter. I love just watching the Sharpie melt into the paper as it dries. So I feel like the end is too short. So what I can start doing is bringing that out. And maybe I want to start growing this top part. But if I can't grow the top part without having to probably add to the bottom. So all these have thickness to them. So you see that's a pretty stylized, but it's a really casual looking letter, right? Looking more like the sans serif, where they're maybe this guy's just kind of, these are the letter S's pajamas, and he's hanging out on a Saturday in his pajamas. Or maybe sometimes they got to get fancy and dress up. So I'm going to start another letter S. And you see, I'm just going to end up filling this whole page full of letters. And how do I see this one working out? Well, I can start adding other graphic elements. So I know down here I did the dome. Maybe on this one I'm going to add some ovals to the ends. This pen is running out. I don't know if I got another one around here. I don't have that many good fine lines. Oh, there we go. That one's going to work. I don't like when they start running out because then your lines aren't consistent. And if you're picky about lines like I am, you're going to care. So I'm just going to retrace that whole thing. So I added 2 ovals to the end. Now look, that could be the end. I mean, that could be it. Or look, I can kind of develop that idea. And maybe I start with 2 ovals. You see they're in relation to each other. And I would start, maybe this is like a pipe. Now I got to start thinking in my mind, how does this attach? How does that swoop around and attach? And look, I could even, funny, I could give it like pipe thread on the ends. Like, maybe I went down to Home Depot and got a piece of pipe and I bent it into the letter S. Or you could go real minimalistic. I mean, what do you really need to have to make the letter S? Can you even take stuff away from this guy? Right? Is that a letter S? I don't know. Is it enough? Is it enough to make me think it's a letter S? You see I've got some implied line there, right, where I broke up the lines. Minimalism is an interesting way. How much can you take away and it's still an S, right? I don't know if I've totally. Right, is that still a letter S, or could I get fancy with it? Maybe it's got like a diamond in the middle. You know, and if you really get into typography, I took a whole semester in college on typography. And you can get into like how they used to use these if you look up like the Book of Kells, which is a cool book. I've actually gone and seen it. It's in Dublin. But they call these things illuminated manuscripts, and there used to be guys that would copy books before typesetting was a thing, before a printing press was a thing. So imagine these guys, these monks, they sat around all day long and all they did was copy books. That was their whole life. And they did it out in these weird cave huts, which are on the west coast of Ireland there. The beehive huts, you can look them up online. But the guys would use these really fancy letters, because if you're going to copy a book for your whole life, right, you might as well do good at it. And so they would draw the fanciest letters they could, especially like at the beginning of the pages or paragraphs. Look at this. How far can I push that letter S out and it's still an S? Look at repetition in line there. Maybe I come back and make it look fancy. Look at that. Is that still a letter S? I don't know. But you don't know till you try. So these are my letter S's. I want to see what you guys come up with. Pick any letter you want, you know. You guys can try, think of any other letter you would normally do. And if you have a calligraphy pen, which is, you can see, it's kind of, you can kind of fancy, you know, with this chisel tip, do some fancy work by swinging it. You may have seen calligraphy before, so. You see, I was able to get thickness on those ends, and I was able to draw and curve that chisel tip in a way. So maybe, you know, maybe you guys are going to want to do the letter K, and this is kind of cool. Do it that way because I can get two thicknesses out of one marker. Or maybe the letter L. Or maybe the letter, now look, I'm going to start flat. Maybe the O or a Q. And you can also make letters tall. Or if I was to do a letter Q, you know, think about this. That's still a letter Q, right? This guy's just squished. Kind of like people come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. My letters can too. So squished or smushed, right? Maybe I want to do a fancy letter Z. And then you can dress those guys all up like they're going all sorts of different places. They can become zany. You could fill them with patterns, right? Maybe I could even do something like that for you guys right now. Oh, I don't like that marker. I want this marker, right? Maybe this one's like futuristic. It's made of metal. It's got like rivets on it. Right? Fancy. Nah, I kind of messed up. I mean, a little short on the bottom, but whatever. It's drawing. That's how it goes. You don't know till you try, and if you don't try, you will never be an artist. Crown Point, I hope you guys are doing well at home. Hope things are going good. I hope this was a nice little break in your day and something different to think about next time you look at logos, next time you look at signs anywhere. Why do those letters look that way? Somebody thought about that, which is kind of crazy to think. But hope all is well, and I'll check in with you guys later.